Today's webinar on Beyond BRICS, Transforming Infrastructure, Cities and Industries for Climate Resilience. This webinar is organized under the overarching theme of the 9th Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum, which will be held on 29th of September to 3rd of October, focusing on the infrastructure, cities, and industry for this session. Please kindly note that the webinar will be recorded, and I'm Jin-Sun Lim, Climate Change Specialist of the Asian Development Bank. Infrastructure, cities, and industries in Asia-Pacific countries are expanding at an unprecedented pace, and we believe that discussion about climate resilience is very timely and urgent. This webinar will explore how infrastructure, cities, and industries in the region can identify and implement transformational adaptation solutions. This discussion will serve as a valuable input to the upcoming APAN Forum, shaping its approaches to infrastructure, cities, and industries, and helping to identify key priorities for future research, action, and collaboration. To start the session, I would like to invite Mr. Argo Singha Roy, Director of Climate Change of the Asian Development Bank. Argo, floor is yours.
Thank you, Jin-Sun, and a very good morning to everybody. It's great to participate in this webinar, and on behalf of Asian Development Bank, let me welcome you all. As Jin-Sun mentioned, this is a weekly seminar, webinars we are having in the run-up to the 9th APAN Forum. And today's topic is looking at Beyond BRICS, Transforming Infrastructure, Cities and Industries for Climate Resilience. I think this topic of transformational adaptation, which is the overarching topic of the APAN Forum, is very critical in the context of infrastructure, cities, and industries because of three reasons. One is, I think transformational adaptation allows us to frame adaptation in a more positive or opportunistic ways, not just about risk management, but it's equally about investing in adaptation, lead to new kind of opportunities. And this is very important because Asia's development pathways will see more and more investments in urban areas, more investments in infrastructure and in industrial growth. As a result of which, it's very important to recognize that all these investments will have to function in a new climate world, as a result of which investing in adaptation will be absolute necessary. Secondly, I think the transformational adaptation also allows us to look at infrastructure cities more at a systems level and not just by asset. Of course, every asset is important, but a systems perspective allows you to think about the interlinkages and how do you maximize the opportunities from these interlinkages. And in this context, it's important to also highlight that, again, we shouldn't be seeing today's webinar in isolation with the other webinars that were held already. But at the end of the day, all these topics of APAN Forum are interrelated, whether it's infrastructure or food or agriculture or health or ecosystems, etc. And lastly, I think transformational adaptation is very important to achieve inclusive outcomes that really address underlying drivers of vulnerability and essentially questions the way infrastructure cities are governed today, and see how in the new climate world, how cities can be governed differently in a more inclusive manner, how infrastructure can be maintained or operated, in a much more practical way. So for me, this is very exciting, and I really hope to the discussion, all of you will actively participate and help bring in bold ideas that can feed into the APAN Forum discussion and help us achieve real concrete, practical, but bold outcomes from the APAN Forum. So with that, over to you, Jin-Sun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Argo, for your opening remarks. Now I would like to invite Professor Shobhakar Dakpal. Professor Dakpal is a professor at the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand, where he also previously served as a vice president and dean. He is a coordinating lead author of the IPCC 6th and 7th assessment report. Professor Dakpal, it's yours.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see my slide. Jinsun, can you confirm? Thank you so much.
Yes, we can see
First
yours.
of all, very good morning to all of you. I think Jinsun and also Mr. Roy from ADB already set a very good stage. I would only say in a limited time that I have is a question of urgency. I'm trying to make a case for the transformational adaptation. If you look at many studies done and many reports that we have seen from various agencies, we can see that we have already incurred trillions of dollars loss from the only from the weather, climate, water extremes, some of the extreme events, and there are lots of other are on horizon. If you really look from scientific perspective, the decadal average of the warming has already happened. If you look at the IPCC report published in back in 2023, 1.1 degree long-term decadal average about in 2000 to 2010 to 2019, and you might have also seen the latest reports coming from WMO that in 2024 our average temperature was 1.55 degree above the pre-industrial era, typical average of 1850 to 1900. The problem is that we have off-tracked our emission pathways. UNEP gap report tells us that in 2023 we have a 57 billion ton of CO2 equivalent emission. The remaining carbon budget is very limited. Hardly we have left 235 gigaton of CO2. Whereas our annual CO2 emission is in the range of 41, roughly around 41 billion ton of CO2. And if you look at net zero emissions and the NDC commitments, that NDC and net zero emission both together hardly keep us in 2 degrees Celsius if everything is fully implemented, but not in the range of 1.5 degree. But the question, there is a NDC achievement rate itself is not going that great. Now, what all this means is that we have to aim for 1.5 degree, but we have to prepare ourselves for a minimum of 2 degrees Celsius and likely 2.5 degree Celsius. That's why going to our conventional, incremental, and sort of reactive adaptation interventions are not enough. We need the transformational adaptation. I think Mr. Roy already mentioned that transformative adaptation has to have happened at the system level, which really triggers lots of structural and functional changes. We need a system transition there, something that is scalable to the higher ground, something long run, something sustained change, something that unlock us from lots of locking in our infrastructure governance system, the way we operate, the way we make our project and investment, how to unlock. That is something very important for this transformational adaptation concept. And also that need to include livelihood, social equity, welfare, need a special care for the vulnerable people, community systems. Then now the question comes of what these examples of this so-called transformational adaptation look like. Of course, I'm not going to get into nitty-gritty of these, each and every examples, but things like, community relocation from flood-prone areas, something managed retreat and relocation, something like a urban land use reallocation. That means we don't development at the high-risk area, designing the spawn cities for the water management, urban redesign to address urban heat issue, which is becoming very serious issue over the years, circularity in the industry, supply chain resilience. We have seen what happened in Thailand during 2011 flood, how the supply chain was affected. We have a lot of lessons to take from that. Of course, making resilient energy system. Then, of course, on the ecosystem agriculture side, we have a lot of examples what we can do in the form of the transformation adaptation. But as I said earlier, are our policies and practice are up to the mark? Clearly, no. So far, we have been largely doing incremental adaptation policies, which are not enough in the context that our emission pathways are not that great, and we have to adapt to the higher level of climate stabilization, not 1.5-degree climate stabilization. So in order to push for that transformative adaptation spectrum, we need a very strong policies. We need to climate proof all of our policies. We have to have a participatory and inclusive governance. We need to find a way to do things differently. For example, our livelihood diversification in the places that we are most vulnerable. We need to devise social protection system, universal basic services, and climate risk informed. And there have been a lot of practice of the so-called parametric risk insurance system. So there are lots of these kind of transformative adaptation policies are needed, without which we really cannot do transformation adaptation. So what it means, all of us, is that we need more knowledge in order to see what works, what doesn't work. We need some new knowledge to do things in different way. We need to put that into the practice. We need innovative policies to really drive that transformation adaptation. We need to reorient our investment in a way that we have sufficient money available for this transformational adaptation, but also our existing investment system need to have fully vetted in the climate proofing. And also we need a very strong societal action. So today's session is very, very interesting. Our distinguished, a set of colleagues which are going to speak with us will put more clear points from different dimensions into it, and I'm very happy to be able to contribute to this discussion. Thank you so much. Back to you, Jinsun.
Thank you very much, Professor Dakar. So, as you mentioned, we need more efforts, and our following speakers actually they will share what kind of efforts, what kind of activities are being done in the different by the different organizations across the region. So we will have two panel discussions from now on. The first panel discussion will be about systemic shift in infrastructure planning for building resilience. And the second panel discussion will be about long-lasting solutions for evolving cities and industries for building resilience. I would like to invite our first panel speakers. There will be three speakers. First of all, Ms. Madrima Sakar-Swat's-Good, Deputy Chief of Disaster Risk Reduction of UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. And the second speaker will be Mr. Amit Tripathi, a Power Sector Advisor, Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, CDRI. And the third speaker will be Mr. Alvin Mejia, Co-Team Lead of the Asian Transport Observatory. Please, speakers, turn on your video cameras, and I would like to also pose the participants that if you have any kind of questions to the panelists, that please use the Q&A function in the bottom of the window. So I would like to invite our first speaker, Madhurima. She will present about infrastructure exposure to climate risks. Madhu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jinsun, and thank you, ADB, for convening this discussion on infrastructure resilience. It's a really important conversation, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this topic. So I just wanted to start by really kind of addressing what our previous speaker also mentioned, is that climate risk is really becoming more frequent, more intense, and more systemic. So, the whole idea of transformative adaptation is truly important. And there's now overlapping and compounding events. So, for example, extreme heat followed by drought, followed by intense rainfall, leading to flash floods or climate variability. These disrupt things like seasonal hydropower production, agricultural outputs, and these are not future risks. They're already disrupting infrastructure systems, particularly in energy, transportation, agriculture. So really what makes this truly urgent is that most of the infrastructure assets were not designed for the hazard profiles that we're seeing now. So many of these investments in infrastructure are still relying on things like historical climate baselines, which might not be valid anymore. So today I just wanted to kind of talk about a few key initiatives from SCAP that is addressing these issues. So the first one is to really respond to this issue of understanding losses and investments. SCAP has been working on disaster and climate risk metrics for quite a while. From 2017 onwards, our Asia Pacific Disaster Report provided one of the core metrics of understanding losses in terms of disasters and climate. And one of the key metrics that we used was the average annual loss, or AAL, which refers to the expected value of asset losses from disasters such as floods, cyclones, earthquakes, and drought. And this is obviously a probabilistic model based on different parameters of the hazards. But what it does is that it provides a consistent and comparable estimate of the financial losses of disasters under current climate and development conditions. And so in our last APDR in 2023, the average annual losses, and we looked at losses both under the current as well as worst case climate scenarios, almost approached $1 trillion for the entire Asia Pacific region. And it represented almost 3% of the regional GDP, including direct damages to infrastructure, housing, agriculture, and productive sectors. So this sort of metric is not only intended to be used in isolation. And I know that CDRI will be our next speaker. And I would also like to note that CDRI has taken the average annual loss metric now and is doing a lot of very interesting work. And our next APDR, which comes out this year, will be reflecting a lot of the metrics that have been shared by CDRI on their GERI platform on average annual loss for different infrastructure sectors. So I really want to note that CDRI has done some really, really exemplary work on this. But like I said, these kind of metrics is really effective when used to support infrastructure planning and prioritization. So, for example, energy and transport ministries can use this to identify high-risk corridors, for example, or facilities and assess the cost effectiveness of adaptation measures. So at the national level, SCAP has been working with several countries to truly apply this approach and integrate loss-based disaster analysis into infrastructure planning and process. So, for example, I just wanted to give 3 key examples. In Mongolia, we worked with the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Food, Agriculture, and Light Industry to really assess the vulnerability of key assets, such as substations, power lines, agricultural storage, etc. To various climate parameters, so heat, rainfall, as well as floods and drought. And these assessments use downscale climate projections and included analysis of how risk levels could shift under the different warming scenarios. So these ministries now have jointly identified infrastructure systems where adaptation options that, like the ones that were previously mentioned, such as relocating or improving cooling performance, would lead to significant reduction in expected losses. In Lao PDR, we also focused on operationalizing climate risk data for decision making by supporting Ministry of Energy and Agriculture to link climate risk screening to impact-based forecasting systems. So infrastructure assets such as hydropower stations, irrigation systems, and facilities and the associated facilities, we analyze them to determine the hazard thresholds. And then these thresholds were tied to, for example, early warning triggers and predefined actions. So these make warnings, early warnings, operationally relevant to infrastructure operators. In Bhutan, we also work with the Department of Local Governance and Disaster Management to analyze damage to agriculture infrastructure. And then using national spatial data and loss records, we really looked at how to prioritize investments in hydropower, for example. And so these changes are now being incorporated into planning guidelines and used for annual investment decisions, as well as the national adaptation plans and the NDCs. So what these examples really show that climate risk data is not just for quantifying risk, but really needs to be used to actively plan, guide, and design infrastructure operations. And this requires a system that can integrate multiple data sets, multiple sectoral collaborations. And to really support this, SCAP now has developed the Risk and Resilience Portal. We launched this portal in 2021, and it really brings together things like downscale climate hazard projections, exposure data sets, historical loss records, average annual loss estimates, as well as multiple other social and economic parameters, and really allows users and especially policymakers to visualize where infrastructure is most at risk. It can test, for example, different adaptation options under different climate scenarios, and then compare the economic implications or design choice, for example. And it really allows across ministries, for example, energy, transport, agriculture, disaster management, to work from a shared evidence-based. And it is currently being localized in Mongolia. These are our pilot countries, Mongolia, Bhutan, and Lao PDR, where they're really supporting this cross-sector coordination and helping link climate risk analysis to investment planning, early warning, as well as national adaptation strategies. So just a short conclusion, climate risks are really changing faster than infrastructure systems are adapting. So to avoid these future loss and damage, we really need to integrate climate risk analysis into infrastructure planning. And I just shared with you a few examples of how we are doing this, and I'd be happy to answer questions or give more details. Thanks.
Thank you, Madhurima. We will have one follow-up question, and also there will be some opportunities to answer the questions directly from the audience using the Q&A function. Now I will invite Amit. He will provide the presentation about the methodology for infrastructure resilience and climate resilience of energy infrastructure in particular. So Amit, please share your screen.
Yeah, so just a second. Visible to everyone, Junson?
Yes, we can see your screen, but it's not in the presentation mode.
Sure, I'll do that. Now is it in presentation mode? I think, yeah. Yeah, so thank you, Junson, and thank you for this opportunity. And of course, Argo and my recent previous speaker, Madhurima, I think have specifically sort of specified, and I don't need to sort of set that tone. I'll straight away delve into what we did in Odisha, because the request and ask is primarily to look at the power sector infrastructure, and where we sort of deep dive into how to establish resilience matrix, how to mobilize resilience infrastructure financing, and how to strengthen institutional governance, and how to accelerate technology deployment and innovation in this space. So it was a very sort of a comprehensive work that we did which started in early 2020, and which sort of tried to test bed and stress test some of the sort of a theoretical framework that was being discussed at that point of time in order to strengthen the infrastructure resilience, specifically to the power sector. So just to sort of quickly brief you about what we're talking about, how to ensure resilience, and specifically I'm talking about in the context of power sector and power sector with respect to treat it as a regulated asset class. You need to understand that whatever we do in this sector, it's a tightly regulated space. The investment, each and every penny that is being invested has to be reflected through the tariff, which is being recovered through you and me. As an end user consumer, there is a lot of questioning. There's a lot of a lot of eyes on how and where the investment is happening, and that's where it gets very tricky for a regulator, for utilities, and to vis-a-vis to policymakers to justify the additional investment that needs to be done in order to make infrastructure resilience. Now, that's the reason I said finding the right balance, managing the energy transition risk, physical risk of extreme weather event. Now, we need to understand that sector itself is evolving and going through a lot of changes. There is energy transition risk, and now, of course, due to the climate risk and other geophysical risk, physical risk to the energy infrastructure is quite high, especially in the scenarios of, for example, with respect to the droughts, cyclones, and flooding. I think these are the three critical hazard type which has a major exposure on the asset types that we are talking about. 2023, Sikkim, more than $1.2 billion of hydropower assets were lost. 2019, more than $1.2 billion of T&D infrastructure in Odisha was lost, which I will talk about. Now, interaction across multi-jurisdictional and subsystems is very critical. As my earlier speakers just mentioned, that it's interdependency which matters a lot. The sector has sort of a interdependency built into it because it serves and sort of act as an input to all the economic activity and the social activities in any system. And then integrating the equity linkages, that's very important, and I don't need to harp upon it more. But how do resilience consideration in power sector needs to be done? I think, as my earlier speakers have also sort of mentioned about prioritizing the planning and investment. Now, it's very critical to find out where is my network at the greatest risk, what infrastructure needs to be provided for the hardening, and how to conduct criticality analysis. Now, it's very important that all the infrastructure assets can be vulnerable in that area for which we are talking about, in that hotspots, but all the vulnerable infrastructure asset need not to be critical. And that's where it's very important to target criticality, because it's not economically feasible to harden or make every infrastructure asset resilient, because it will cost a lot. And at the end, again, as I said, it will start reflecting into tariff and there would be a backslash. So we need to be very careful where we are investing and how much we are investing. So this is what I think, just a brief about how to ensure resilience. And this is something which we try to do in Odisha. Odisha and Cyclone Fani in 2019, a major cyclone came with a speed of more than 205 kilometers per hour to between 210 kilometers per hour. Estimated damage of more than $1.2 billion at that point of time. Both the transmission and distribution infrastructure was lost, and more than 200,000 poles of distribution. So in terms of the numbers and magnitude and the impact, because impact in the sense it took more than 2 months to restore entire electricity grid. So just let alone talk about the first order loss of economic order, the second and third order loss due to the loss of economic activities was immense. So what we started a study which looked at 3 components, which was one was on disaster preparedness and management, which is a short-term sort of work around what can be done with respect to the existing infrastructure and assets and capabilities that utilities and the state has. So working on the preparedness plan, DMP plans, and looking at the recovery and reconstructions manuals and SOPs. What in component 2, what we specifically looked at, we mapped entire T&D infrastructure of Odisha and laid out over a hazard map, and we did the risk mapping of that thing. So we found out what all assets are vulnerable, what all assets are critical, and on the basis of the criticality, which assets needs to be prioritized with respect to the investment that is required. And then specifically, we looked at what specifically new technology and innovation is required and what is available in the market, what the code standards and design and regulations suggest, and what improvement that needs to be done. For example, I think needs to improve the wind zone map, as my earlier speaker just said, that current climate and the future climate realities do not reflect into the building standard practices that are being practiced since last 30, 40, 50 years. So there is a need to change it. We need to be more dynamic. We need to be more real time. For example, wind zone map in India haven't been changed for very long. And if it's being changed, it's not very adequately reflecting the realities. And then what it does, primarily, the wind zone speed then gets reflected into transmission tower building codes, which is IS 802. What it does is basically you're going to build the same infrastructure and again for the wind speed of 180 kilometers per hour, wherein we have seen in past that that's not the reality. It's more than 210, 220, 230. In fact, in 1999 super cyclone, it was 260 to 70 kilometers per hour of the speed that was being recorded at that point of time. So reality is very different, but unfortunately, the practical actions on the ground aren't really adjusted to the realities which are being seen. So that's what we did. And then of course we looked into institutional governance and framework. We tried to create a multi-stakeholder governance framework. We tried to sort of develop integrated disaster management plan and cross-border cooperation mechanism within the system. Just to quickly take you through what we did in terms of the technicalities, because I think that would help some of our speakers. Of course, we did the zonation of cyclone and flood. Then we looked at exposure assessment, looked at the vulnerability assessment, and then looked at the criticality assessment and then the prioritization assessment of the investment. There were a lot of interesting facts and figures. Because of time, I'm not going to take a lot of time. I think I will share the link of the policy brief to everyone. I think they can read it. But for example, discoms have approximately 30% of infrastructure exposed to 100 years return period scenario. So these are quite a stark numbers and figures that we came across. Just a second, I'll just quickly take you through some of the recommendations but other than the asset level recommendations on the prioritization list as well as standards and codes, what we did, we also tried to frame the entire discussion around how to look at national policy and institutional governance framework of power sector. And we did try to divide into three boxes, policy pyramid, I would like to call it. Policy, where we looked at what policy interventions and target setting that we need to do, what recommendation and supporting measures are required in order to achieve those policy interventions, and what implementation framework and tools is required in order to achieve those policy interventions and targets. So we came up with a lot of work around for example, inclusion of resilience assessment component across the policy, as my earlier speaker said. So there are a lot of sectoral policies that needs to look resilience component. For example, India has a huge RDSS scheme, power sector specific sectoral scheme, which is revamped distribution sector scheme. Now there is an opportunity, and I think new phase of it's going to start soon, but there is an opportunity to include resilience window, dedicated resilience funding window into this RDSS scheme, so that utilities, specifically the coastal utilities which are prone to the cyclones, can easily access, and some sort of a co-blended financing mechanism needs to be developed around that scheme along with the MDBs and institutional investors. So some of these type of we've started looking at the governance framework of things. Because of the time constraint, I will try to keep it short, and I think I'll try to end it. But I'll request, I think, for all of us to look on the four key pillars for resilience infrastructure prior to specifically to the power sector. Establish resilience matrix. I think that's very critical. I think there is a lack of resilience matrix which confuses the utilities. What specifically utilities need primarily is how to build that bridge between the science and science to engineering. Utilities don't care what does 1.5 degrees centigrade means, or what they really means, what they really want from us in order to define what action needs to be done in order to achieve resilience. Mobilize resilience infrastructure financing. That's very important. I think the money needs to come from somewhere. Back of the envelope calculation, $1.5 trillion US dollars of investment goes into the power infrastructure every year annually, which grows around 7 to 8% every year. approximately anywhere between $50 billion to $100 billion specifically needs to be raised in order to achieve resilience measures per se. Because as per our study and estimate, 5 to 10% of the investment in any capex can be built into for the resilience measure. And third, the last, strengthen the institutional governance and coordination mechanism. That's very important. There are different stakeholders, meteorological department, utilities, policymakers, and regulators. Everyone needs to talk in order to come up with the better solutions. And I'll cut it short, and I'll leave it here and open to any questions from anyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you so much. Now we are jumping to from the energy infrastructure to the transport infrastructure. So I would like to invite Mr. Alvin Meja, co-team leader, Asian Transport Observatory. Alvin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jinsun. Can I just confirm that you are seeing the slides correctly?
Yes, I can see yours.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, good day, everyone. And I would like to thank the organizers for the privilege to talk to you today. So my name is Alvin Mejia, and I am the co-team lead for the Asian Transport Observatory. We are essentially an initiative that was initiated by the Asian Development Bank. We are being supported as well by the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and more recently the World Bank, essentially trying to strengthen the knowledge base of transport in Asia and the Pacific. And I'll be sharing a few reflections on the state of transport and within the context of climate resilience in Asia Pacific, drawing on the analysis that we've done together with an organization called Lifelinks. It's just framing the breakdowns and the breakthroughs in the sector. You can check the report through the QR code here. I'll quickly talk about the infrastructure gap, and then we move on to the risks, and finally, just briefly discuss policy standards and solutions. Oh, sorry. Okay, so essentially what we're seeing is that Asia Pacific is still really in the process of building out our transportation systems, and the gaps compared to, let's say, high income economies and regions remain wide. Road and rail density across Asia Pacific averages currently at around 433 kilometers per 1,000 square kilometers compared to 680 in OECD countries. And when we look at on a per population basis, the region is just at 3.8 to 4.6 kilometers per 1,000 people, while OECD is on average around 17 kilometers. So really, there's a lot of gap to catch up on. Quality is also an issue. So most of the low and lower income economies in the region have infrastructure scores, as you can see in the slide. It's around hovering, 2 to 3 out of 5, based on ratings by World Bank, while richer peers in Asia, Europe, North America would score normally above 3. So the region faces really this dual challenge in terms of expanding the networks fast enough to meet the increasing demand while ensuring that also the new investments and also retrofitting the existing ones and the new ones that don't lock the future vulnerabilities. As mentioned earlier, legacy infrastructure as well as the incoming ones, if we don't adopt changes, are not going to be built to withstand future scenarios in terms of the risks as well. On top of the infrastructure gaps, the climate risks are intensifying. This was also discussed by Dr. Shobakar earlier. Asia Pacific accounts for like 65% of the estimated global physical damage to transport infrastructure, maybe around $8.5 billion per year. Just to give some few numbers, more than 3/4 of the global floods, 85% tropical cyclones, 94% landslides have occurred in the region, and over 3/4 of the road and rail networks in the region are actually exposed to things like extreme precipitation in high income scenarios, and disruptions, for example, in Asian ports could also be induced by climate change relevant events. Alone could threaten 70% of the global trade. So without urgent actions, climate shocks can lead to significant losses now and in the future and would hold back the progress that we have. So how do we then move forward? Some key insights here. Firstly, finance needs to be reoriented. So based on the numbers that we saw, so in terms of international climate finance, only less than 1% of the transport finance, international climate finance actually went to adaptation. And with this, considering that the region's investment requirements for transport between 2025 to 2035 is around 31 trillion that we estimate, is a lot of changes that needs to be done. Second, in terms of standards, design codes, we see a lot of the need for updating. We looked at the various codes within the region. We see that there are more than half, 60% of the road design codes that we saw actually predating 2015. They may not necessarily reflect today or tomorrow's climate risks. It's also what was the same situation that was mentioned by Amit earlier in the power sector. And thirdly, policy-induced changes actually need to leapfrog. Countries are beginning to use resilience-based design, asset management technologies, innovative financing, but which would shift away from the generic maintenance towards a more systematic sort of approach towards adaptation. Finally, in terms of collaboration and tools, these actually matter. This was also mentioned earlier by the speakers. Regionally, new tools and forums such as this would be important in terms of moving forward systematically. There are a lot of tools that was mentioned by Amit, Madhurina earlier, which are also helping countries to identify the most vulnerable sorts of critical links and assets. And really what we're seeing here is that the message is clear. Resilience, adaptation can no longer be incremental. Transformational change really means aligning standards, innovative policies, finance, and really working together across the different sectors and borders. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for their patience.
Thank you very much for the speakers of the panel one discussion. Given the time constraint, I would like to move toward the panel two now, and maybe I will save some of the questions at the end of the Q&A session. So I would like to invite the four speakers for the panel two. The first speaker will be Ms. Ok Jung, a climate change specialist of the ADB. And the second speaker will be Mr. Kyosuke Inada, Director General for Sustainability Management of Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. And the third speaker will be Mr. Omid Saberi, a Principal Industry Specialist, International Finance Corporation. And the fourth speaker will be Mr. Yanko Wong, Asia Pacific Regional Climate and Forestry Officer of Building Workers International. So please, I would like to invite all the panels of turn on their camera, and I would like to start with the first presentation from the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Shin-sun and everyone. My name is Ok Jung from the Asian Development Bank. I'm working as a climate change specialist and supporting multiple ADB loan processing. And also, actually, I'm leading a TA focusing on city climate action planning. So as you can see in this slide, I would like to share some initial insight from the TA implementation. Thank you. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, the TA has been approved only the last year, November, and we are, very at initial stage. And this TA aim to support selected cities for now, we have three countries in Uzbekistan and Pakistan, and we will be launching soon an Indian program. So the main objective is to support the selected cities. Cities means, subnational government, including provinces, and effectively address technical and financial gaps, related to climate actions. Climate actions means climate resilience and also the mitigation. So for this, the TA, as you can imagine, we have a kind of, the definition saying what actually it means a city climate action plan. So city climate action plan is not only technical, but also strategic and technical tool to cities, to help cities or city regions or provinces or supranational government adapt to climate change risk and also reduce GHG emissions. So through comprehensive soft and hard interventions, as we can imagine, for cities, essential urban infrastructure and services to deliver and to generate the impact and the core benefit for people, communities, and the economy, local and the national economy, and the infrastructure, how to make the more climate resilient infrastructure, and also the ecosystem and the nature. So as you can see on the right side, in general, CCAP consists of 3 different parts. Baseline, where we are, and the second part is action planning, including goal setting. So what to do to achieve the goal. And the last part is how to implement, including the climate finance component. Next slide, please. So we are, more or less at initial stage, but based on the current global and Asian experiences and the knowledge on city climate action planning, and we have assessed, that there are multiple opportunities to help cities to improve their climate resilience through this CCAP. So our first observation is more and more cities are involved in the CCAP planning and implementation. Initially, it started, mainly for and with the big or largest cities. But now, there are many secondary cities or even small towns. They are involved in, developing this kind of a city action plan for climate change. And also, in relation to the topic of this second part of our discussion, CCAP is actually a long-lasting and integrating solution which enables a transformational and adaptation measures because it allows or it facilitates a systems approach, and the city as an administrative and also political because of a decentralization, and also community-based and also urban activities and a functional entity. And also another opportunity is city has access to multiple methodologies, so already available and they can use. Our TA is to make it the value. Add value to existing practices. So we identified a few challenges in city climate, particularly in city climate risk assessment. So when we look at the existing city climate action plan, particularly adaptation part, city climate risk assessment are in some cases generic or high level, and then not necessarily use the the available climate, the latest climate projections. And also we can understand that climate risk application, the concept of a climate risk can be complex because it is defined as a function of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. Through a city climate action plan, how to interpret it and how to apply this conceptual framework into specific city context. There are different methodologies, but it may be complex for a small town or city. And consequently, maybe some climate adaptation actions are also generic. And particularly, we discussed the infrastructure. So for the urban land use planning or specific infrastructure design to inform those key components of city development, maybe climate actions are more generic, not robust enough. And also, as you can imagine, action planning is easier in many cases than implementation and also climate city action plan itself is not investment ready always. So the TA wanted to test or demonstrate the value of data and evidence-driven city resilience planning, particularly to strengthen the climate risk assessment. We use the latest climate science and the technologies, and also GIS and the satellite imagery, particularly urban land use, to assess which communities in midterm and the long term are more vulnerable to which exposure, and also climate hazard and etc. So that climate actions are more specific to these identified climate risk. And another point is how to balance top-down and the bottom-up approach. And the bottom-up approach, how to make the CCAP more inclusive and participatory, reflecting the needs of local communities. And also, as we can imagine, financing investment is really critical, which is not always the core part of the CCAP. So, ADB is a development bank and supporting the design or implementation of the urban infrastructure project. So, based on our experience, we want to focus more on not only planning side, but implementation, investment, and the financing side. Let me stop here. Thank you. Over to you, Jinsun.
Thank you very much, Okju. So we are now inviting another speaker to talk about how to meet the increasing demand from cities. So I would like to invite Kyosuke from JICA. Kyosuke, floor is yours. So while we are waiting for the presentation slides are ready, so I would like to again reinform that there is a Q&A function, and all the panelists are welcome to answer any kind of questions posted on the Q&A, and all the participants, they can also put the questions in the Q&A. Okay, Kyosuke, floor is yours. Kyosuke, you are on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
So thank you for inviting us to this seminar. My name is Kyosuke Inada. I'm the Director General for Sustainability Management at JICA. And I'm going to talk about 3 things based on examples of activities in the Philippines. And the first is that we need transformational bricks before thinking about transformation beyond bricks. I will show you why this is the case, building on our self-explanatory river basin management in Manila. Secondly, in emerging and developing Asian countries, we need government buy-in and budgetary commitment to transform the entire society into a resilient one. And the third and the last message is the power of science. So with the rapid advancement of digital technologies, quantified analysis based on accurate and precise data are now more accessible. And by utilizing scientific analysis, we can make policy decisions on resilience more evidence-based. So next slide, please. So this slide is a little advertisement of the JICA for those of you who don't know about us. So we are very similar to ADB in providing concessional financing for the governments and the private sector for Asian countries and other parts of the world. So the difference between the ADB is maybe that we go beyond Asia Pacific into Africa, Middle East, Latin America, and that our technical cooperation program is a major pillar, enabling us to provide all kinds of studies, capacity building, including training programs and expert engagement. Next slide, please. Yes, this slide and the next slide are about my first message, which is we need transformational bricks before thinking about transformation beyond bricks. So as you can see here, Japan has been helping the Philippines conduct holistic river basin management and flood control in Manila since the 1980s, extending huge concessional loans, technical and knowledge cooperation for planning, and local human resource development. Next slide, please. So as a result, based on the actual and simulated inundation area after the typhoon in 2020, you can see that the benefits of the transformational brick building are crystal clear, saving billions of dollars and, more importantly, saving the lives and livelihoods of millions. So you can think of creating numerous ways to go beyond bricks, but they are definitely not transformational enough if you're still in the situation shown on the left side of the slide. Next slide, please. So this slide is about my second message, which is why that we need a government buy-in and budgetary commitment to transform the entire society into a resilient one. So since the 1970s, JICA has been supporting disaster risk reduction investment in the Philippines through flood control planning, capacity building, and human resource development. In 1999, the government of the Philippines established a department that specializes in flood control, only one of its kind among developing countries. So the department has rapidly increased its budget for flood control, which implies that the Philippines can now accelerate transformational brick building by themselves. Next slide, please. Yes, so this slide is about my third message, which is utilizing the power of science by taking advantage of the recent digital transformation. In order to make our investment more efficient and increases the value for money, well-informed policy decisions are quite important. The program that JICA supports is a joint research between the Philippines and Japan to connect various models across different disciplines that allow assessment of water-related disaster risks. This hybrid risk assessment model enables future local economic development scenarios in line with disaster risk reduction measures and also present policy recommendations for possible future climate-related risks. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, so going forward, I have two messages. First, we need to integrate climate resilience into infrastructure planning, as has been said by my previous speakers. And this slide is an example of how JICA actually screens all new projects to ensure mitigation and adaptation risks are addressed and measures are incorporated into project designs and they are implemented as intended. So ideally, all entities, or at least all governments, should check their spending in a similar manner so that opportunities to transform their society into a resilient one are not missed. And the next slide, please. So this is my final slide. So my second message going forward is to take advantage of the innovative solutions offered by the private sector. So this slide is just an example of a recent JICA-assisted private-public collaboration that introduced AI-based technology to help government offices in the Philippines rapidly collect, process, and communicate pertinent information in times of disasters at a reasonable cost. Digital transformation allows tailor-made solution at significantly lower cost than before. So proactive thinking and effective use of these technologies can benefit people by making them more resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kyosuke, for your presentation. So now we have discussed about cities, and now we are moving to the building sector. So I would like to invite Omid from IFC. He will present about the Building Resilience Index work of IFC. Omid, floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me. My name is Omid Saberi. I'm part of the IFC World Bank. And I would be very briefly mention a program that we have on the building sector. So this is a hospital that I visited in 2021 after a tornado. And unfortunately, as you see in this case, if a hospital that is built to building code cannot resist the impact of different disasters, then people, they do not have anywhere to go, right? And we have been seeing these kind of impact in different parts of Asia almost every day. How we have been trying to respond to this need within IFC, we have developed a program called Building Resilience Index that focuses on the buildings. And as we look at the cities, majority of the human wealth is stored in buildings, and we spend majority of our time in buildings. And if the buildings are not safe, then the cities can't be safe. What we have developed is a program that looks at three elements, very simple. Number one, it looks at developing hazard screening, and the hazard screening is designed for engineering. So the way that the Building Resilience Index looks at the hazard maps of 14 hazard categories looks at a quantitative impact of those hazards. If we are looking at flood, what is the depth of flood? If we are looking at earthquake, what is the exact magnitude of earthquake that can happen at a specific location so that engineers can design to it. The second part, after hazard screening for every location, and it has the global maps, then the second is if we have a specific hazard in a specific location, what kind of engineering solutions we need to develop in a building to make the building resilient and adapt to those situations. Those hazard elements, risk reduction elements are around 100 checklists that for every building needs to be checked. And if those elements are implemented well in the building, then the building can be considered as a resilient building. If some of them are not meet, then the building can be considered as non-resilient, and that improvement needs to be done either through retrofit or change of design if it is a new building. The last part of this is a third-party verification, because as banks, for example, we heard from ADB, we heard from JICA, investment is important in this sector. But for investment, we need a third-party verified process. So we have third-party verification that can verify all the hazards and actions and then provide a rating for the building. So a building can be not resilient, red, B level, which is the basic resilience, and then goes all the way to AA. And that then enables different players to easily identify if a building is resilient or not. As IFC, what we are doing, we are using this program to directly invest in assets, like, for example, in hospitals, in schools, in housing projects around Asia. For example, in Philippines, in Vietnam, in Indonesia. We also finance other commercial banks to use this program to identify how they can invest in more resilient assets, or working with insurers to provide better insurance to more resilient assets. We developed this program as a free and public good service, so every bank and every insurance can use this program. We also work with governments to come up with resilient codes and incentives to support resilience in buildings. The way that this program works is that it creates a language that is common language between builders, construction developers, the loan officers in the banks to understand what resilience is, building owners or homeowners to understand when they are renting or buying a building, whether that building is resilient or not, and finally, insurance officers. We have been partnering in Asia with QBE, one of the largest insurance providers, and Marsh, to support building resilience in the housing, in all building sector. We also have Bureau Veritas and RENA as two trusted verification partners to be able to verify these assets, to be able to then provide that to the banking sector or insurance sector. I'm going to stop here. We would be happy to provide you more details if you're interested in learning more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omid, for your presentation. And now I would like to invite Alvin from the Asian Transport Observatory. And I would like to invite Yanka from the Building Workers International, and he will provide another point of view about the people in the industry, how they are affected by climate impacts. Yanka, floor to you.
All right, I think we are still okay. Great. All right, thanks everyone for inviting me to this important discussions and also dialogue. Because I think first of all, let me quickly introduce who is BWI, Building and Woodworkers International. Basically, we are the global union federations, and we organize more than 12 million workers from construction, building materials, forestry, and wood sectors. So next slide, please. So today we are focusing more on like how the climate impacts are going to climate impacts going to affect the working class. Next slide, please. So as we know, the climate change is a essential threat right now, and it also affect a lot on the working class. And sometimes when we talk about climate, we are often neglect about the how it impacts towards the working class. So for examples, any kind of like a climate issue happen, for example, typhoon, floods, or even like extreme heats is going to affect the job losses and even create the occupational safety and health. For example, people are prone to more risks for injuries, for accidents. And then definitely the health impacts a lot. I will describe it later. And if let's say the rising sea levels is also causing the displacement, and people have to migrate and they will lose their job. So next. So this is, you can see, today I'm more focusing on the extreme heat towards the workers. So actually, the South Asia or Southeast Asia are heavily impacted by the extreme heat, as you can see in the maps. Next slide, please. And so what kind of heat stress is going to affect the construction workers, for example? Next. And so according to the ILO report, after this, there's an estimation from 2030 to 2050, there will be 250,000 heat stress related death. And as you can see, if the workers are exposed to extreme heat, this is the disease or even the kind of like a health impact that you can see on the screen. For example, headache, seizure, stroke, and even heat cramp and liver failure and also kidney failure. So next. And but what we want to mention here is that actually we want to send a message out is actually protecting workers is a good investment for the businesses, because as you can see, if let's say there's a study show that every 1 degree Celsius increase, it will be there will be like 2.6% of the productivity losses. And then if let's say we talk about the investment part, if let's say we invest more on the safety intervention, let's say rest, shaded areas, provide enough hydration places for people to drink for more waters. Actually, investments is like 160%. And I will show a bit more later in the detail in the report. Next. So I'll just share a bit what kind of our interventions or our campaign on heat stress. So next. So our heat stress campaign is very straightforward. So there are three main demands. One is we mentioned that the workers had to have the autonomy to stop working when it's too hot, especially they couldn't bear with the extreme heat. And then there need to be a protection from the heat stress, workplace adaptations, and then there's any kind of social protections. And then last but not least, the compensation if there's a work stoppage. Next. So what kind of like trade unions and employers can do more? First of all, definitely about the educations and awareness. And then, like I mentioned just now, because even though we may have a lot of mechanisms of equipments to measure the heat stress, but the workers need to have the autonomy to stop it, because we know ourselves better, and different people may have different health conditions, right? And then there's a workplace adjustment, which means that we need to prepare enough like PPEs, like cooling vests, shaded area for people to rest, and when there's a heat stress, extreme heat, enough water supplies. Assimilations is kind of like you are not directly exposed to extreme heat. So you need to yeah. Sorry, yeah. And then doing the regular checkup, etc. And next, and then what are we asked for the government intervention is on the they need to be regulate, especially recognizing extreme heat as the occupational safety and health issue, and then there need to be a heat action plan. And in fact, there can be a heat insurance whereby when there is a temperature exceed a certain temperature extreme heat, that means that there will be like automatically compensations to the workers. And definitely we need to have a health registry for heat stress because after all, because you can see the kidney failure or liver failure or even kind of heat strokes or any kind of things, maybe it doesn't directly link to heat stress. So what we want here to clarify on this part. Next. So we can do a lot more. For example, we need to recognize heat stress, for example, for finance institutions. But after all, I think as the Global South, we need to work as a collective voices and to push this heat stress as one of the core agenda in COP30, and also to increase the climate finance for adoption plans, etc. The last slide, please. So so the message is very clear. The call to action is like, first, we need to integrate worker safety in, especially on the heat stress issue, into the climate policy and investment, and then need to partner with the trade unions because trade unions are the key stakeholders in terms of we are the one directly to deal with the workers, and so that we can deliver a just transition for all. And next slide would be the report that you can scan to understand more about our the research on our heat stress issue. I will describe more or explain further about some good examples in across the globe later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yanka, for your presentation. So now we would like to move to the Q&A, and we would like to invite all of the participants. If you have any kind of questions, please feel free to post it in the Q&A. And I would like to invite our organizers to share the Mentimeter screen so that the participants can join the Mentimeter survey. So participants will have two options to have more interactive discussion. The first one, if you have any kind of questions directly to the speakers in the panels, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A. And also, you are invited to express your opinion through our Mentimeter survey. So please, the organizer, could you share the Mentimeter screen? In the meantime, I would like to flag some of the questions already raised in our Q&A chat. So for Okyu and Yosuke, Kyosuke, there is a question about like what kind of unique challenges does an urban environment present for climate adaptation compared to more rural or coastal areas? How are you addressing issues like informal settlements and limited open spaces? The question is coming from Emanuele. And Okju and Kyosuke, would you be able to answer the question?
So very quickly to share my quick feedback, because the question is really the fundamental and the big question. So just to share the quick reflections. So urban or cities has many people with multiple types of urban infrastructure and the services that we have to put together to make a very comprehensive and a holistic response. So I think urban issues I don't think it is more delicate or more complex than any other the environmentally very vulnerable coastal areas or any other countries, for example. But at the same time, the number of beneficiaries in cities are, the numerous. So the impact can bigger, then particularly for to keep people living in the cities can be more easily benefit compared to the kind of rural areas. But all depend on the objective of interventions and also very local and the territorial context. I'm not sure if it reply to your question, which is a big question, but I look forward to further opportunities to discuss it more in detail. Thank you. Kyosuke, do you have feedback?
Yes. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Kyosuke, you're on mute, but we were able to hear you just for seconds.
Right. Okay, so can you hear me now? Okay. So I'll focus on the addressing part. So there are three things. One is that we're quite actively engaged in the support for urban planning based on climate scenarios, so that the best thing is to avoid people living in areas with high climate risks. That's number one. But secondly, because of as the person mentioned, because of the number of people moving into the cities, it's probably quite unrealistic to evacuate everyone from an area with high risks. And there, as I mentioned during my presentation, the transformation of bricks is always comes into play in cities in Asia and other developing countries. And thirdly, what we're doing right now, testing in African cities, is that when some disasters happen, I think we need to provide an early, quick payout to those being damaged so that they can quickly recover their livelihood. So we are trying to use digital technologies to provide, very quick compensation so that they can, rebuild what they had before the disaster. So those kind of three things that we are currently using or testing as to address the very complex challenges in the urban area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyosuke, for the response as well. I would like to invite also Madhu to respond to the question about from the Erica. So there is a question about when we talk about infrastructure, housing is a major sector that are posed with high risks as they expand with rapid urbanization. He's asking about this risk resilience portal address donations for buildings for the local government to make evidence-based decisions for safe shelters, and also the investment to all infrastructure resilience is much higher in the mountains, and how can the gaps in the investments be ensured to the mountains when we talk about the $1 trillion investment needed?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think this is really important, especially for mountain regions. SCAP is part of the third pole coordination mechanism. And so the risk and resilience portal currently, we are downscaling, we have a methodology for downscaling climate data, particularly from the, I think I mentioned in my other response, we are currently downscaling the IPCC climate data from a 100 by 100 kilometer resolution to about a 1 by 1 kilometer resolution for the Asia Pacific region. And particularly in the the more downscale resolutions can actually be used to really understand at a local level where the risk hotspots are, right? So we always say that risks are global, but adaptation is really local. So to understand what to adapt, where the investments need to be, you need to have very, very granular risk information. And that is what we're starting to do also with the Risk and Resilience Portal, is provide this really granular risk information. The second thing about the mountains, I think that's very important, particularly, I think there was another question on the Hindu Kush mountain range as well. So on our portal, we also are working with the global leads for early warning on understanding impact-based forecasting, particularly for mountain regions, which is quite a scientific process to really understand the parameters for early warning. But once we have, this impact-based forecasting for early warning, we can expand that to particularly looking at infrastructure resilience, and to really focus on understanding where not only where the impacts are, but can we have integrate these early warning systems into infrastructure resilience, as well as closing the gaps for things like cloudbursts or GLOFs, for example. In Bhutan, GLOFs is a major risk. And that's something that I think we need to, we're working on, but I think there needs to be a lot more work done in this area of understanding early warning in mountainous regions as well.
Thank you very much, Madhu. Now I would like to invite the questions about Alvin and also Omid. So Alvin and Omid, there is a question about the good example in our region where climate proofing of infrastructure projects is made obligatory part of the approval process with good system in place to do that. So I think it's related to the infrastructure and also the building codes as well. So Omid and Alvin, would you be able to answer this question?
Yeah, if I may, just very quickly on the transport sector, the one specific, let's say, example that I can share, the ones that when we talk about the standards, we can look into how Australia has done it in the past. They have integrated what they call like the rainfall and runoff 2019 sort of scenarios into their road guidelines. So essentially, all the methods, the data, the tools in terms of calculating those rain and runoff estimates would now incorporated in the guidelines for the road construction. That's something that is something that more or less, let's say, one of the gold standards, I suppose. But in terms of the integration with the policies, which essentially also sets the mandate. So I think Bangladesh recently had incorporated targets, for example, in the railway transport sector, like 50% of the railway network needs to be climate proof by 2030. So it sets the mandate and it sets the things rolling on the ground. So yeah, maybe a couple of examples there.
Thank you very much, Alvin. Omid, do you want to add something?
Yes, so from our side, I think one of the work that we have done in the region, we worked with the Philippines, with the DPWH, and then later in Vietnam and Indonesia. And this work was done around 10 years ago by developing codes and requirements for energy efficiency, and heat is obviously one of the elements that when you have passive design measures and natural ventilation and cooling, then reduces the impact of heat. And that those codes were required by the government, and that they are now implemented across the countries, which is very, very important and impressive. What we need to do is now expand those requirements to resilience in wider agenda, right? Flood, now we are hearing, even today I was looking at the news that Vietnam is gonna brace for another cyclone and flood in some regions. So this is going to be happening over and over, and it's time for the governments to expand the requirements beyond just heat to wider resilience in the building sector. One example that Alvin mentioned in Australia, requirements for at least large buildings is mandatory. Maybe what we can do is in these countries to start saying that any building that is more than, say, 1,000 or 2,000 square meters need to disclose whether they have any risks. And if they have risks, they need to do retrofits or improvements. That would be a game changer in these countries. And I would recommend doing that. We would be providing financing and support from ADB, from IFC and others, but it's important for governments to start pushing the at least large asset owners to take actions.
Thank you very much for your response, Omid. Now I would like to invite Bianca. There are two questions in the Q&A. The first one is about how much private sector are aware to invest more to deal with the problem of the heat stress, and if there is any kind of threshold considered as extreme heat is very serious to workers.
Actually, to answer the first question, I don't have a data to speak like how many business or sectors or private sectors are already aware about this. But for BWI as a global union federation, we are mobilizing our athletes, the trade unions, to actually involve this as the core agenda when they are doing their collective bargainings, especially those who are really impacted a lot, like the South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the others region. And what the key message that we are asked to highlight it in the collective bargaining agreement is that how this investment in the so-called the PPE or those called like the resilience and also the protections measures can actually benefits to the businesses itself. For example, it reduces the injuries, it reduces accidents, reduce the health impact, and after this, you are not required to pay out a lot for these things that I mentioned just now. So this is what we are trying to push forward. And then regarding whether there's a threshold for the temperature, it really depends on the area, and we also need to take into account it's not just the temperature itself, but also the humidity level as well. So for example, if let's say the temperature can be like 38 degrees Celsius, but if let's say the humidity is very high, the people cannot sweat off, and that means it also create a sort of like the heat stress against the person as well. So I really say it have to depends on which area are you in, and maybe urban area and also rural areas should be also taken into account. And so according to our research, different countries and different cities had a different threshold, and it need to be included with the humidity level as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bianca. Given the time constraint, I would like to appreciate all the speakers. And just before closing our session, I would like to emphasize all the panelists. If you have time, please fill out the answers in the Q&A if it is addressed to you, if it is relevant to you. And also all the speakers, all the participants is also welcome to join the Mentimeter survey questions if you haven't answered to these questions. The Mentimeter link is shared in the chat. During today's discussion, I learned very key messages, very interesting key messages. First of all, we are very much emphasizing how we should integrate climate risk consideration in the very early stage of the planning and implementation of the infrastructure and city planning. And also the second part, we were discussing what kind of roles can be played by the effective policies and also appropriate regulations and standards. And we also discussed how the industries and the private sector and also the communities and workers, they can react to these kind of efforts to build the resilient infrastructure in cities. So I think we have heard a lot of very insightful and very useful metrics and tools in this discussion. I truly appreciate all the contributions of all the speakers, and also thank you for actively participating in the discussion through the chat and also the through the survey. Thank you very much, and we will see you all in the APAN forum.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye bye.